Well, good morning. Good morning. My name is Jamey Dickens, and I'm one of the pastors on staff here at Buckhead Church, and I get to lead Inside Out, our high school program. So I'm a huge fan of Alexia. Alexia, if you're up there, proud of you. And we are finishing part 3 of a series called Life Hacks. And I've got a question to get us started this morning, and it's going to require you to talk to someone around you. So get ready for that. I would love for you to answer this question right here or fill in this blank. If I just had blank, I'd be happy. So I want you to turn to someone around you and say the first thing that comes to your mind. If that's too personal, then just make up something. But here we go. If I just had blank, then I'd be happy. Tell someone around you. All right. Thank you for doing that. I hope you met somebody new. Give them a high five, say I'll talk to you later. Hey, so what's interesting is they actually do surveys of people's answer to this question. And I brought with me the top 6 responses of people in America to if I just had blank, I'd be happy. And I figured we would do this Family Feud style. So does anybody want to guess what the number 1 response is to this question? Ding, 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 ding. It is money. Man, if I just had a little more money, then I'd be happy. What else do you think is on there? Anybody want to throw out some other options? Time? Well, okay. That, interestingly, number 2 was accomplishment. If I just had, like at work or in life, that I achieved what I wanted to achieve. Number 3 was appearance. If I looked a certain way or people thought I was in shape or looked beautiful. Number 4 was specifically a house or a car. A house or car, an asset. 5 was romance, amen to that. And then finally, a consumer or food item was actually the 6th one. These are the people that are like, yo, if I just had a donut, I'd be happy, you know? All I need is an iPhone, that's all I need. And chances are, one of yours might have been on here in some way. In fact, they said that 93% of people believe that their happiness was on this list right here. The key to their happiness was here. And chances are, yours is on that list somewhere as well, that you think one of these or maybe some combination of these, man, that can make you happy, or at least it's an important part of the equation. And that's certainly interesting, right? But what I find even more fascinating is the Harris poll. The Harris poll, they went around and they just asked people, hey, are you happy? And they publish the results every single year. Does anyone want to guess the percentage of Americans last year that said, I am happy? 33%. Yo, 33%. In fact, they said the number's actually probably lower because there's a certain personality type of people, they don't like to admit they're not happy. So they lie. They're like, oh yeah, I'm happy, you know? And I'm like, oh my goodness, 33%, y'all, we live in America. We're in like the place everybody wants to move. We're in the 1% of the world. What? We got a problem, y'all. We've got a problem. And you might be wondering, wow, like why is it 33%? And if we had the time to have a community conversation, I bet as a community, we might point to at least 2 sources or 2 things that may be to blame. One of them we'd probably say is, well, it's kind of our culture. And don't get me wrong, I love our culture. But isn't this true? Our culture really only cares about what's current, right? I mean, just think about upgrading your phone. It's that way with everything. Our culture has a way of baiting us to be constantly dissatisfied, of addicting us to new and better and bigger. Our culture has a way of taking destinations and making them waypoints. Like as soon as you think you've arrived, no, now you gotta go here if you're gonna be happy. Our culture has a way of turning happiness or making happiness this right here. You know, something that you're always chasing after. And so yeah, we could point to culture, but I think we'd also all agree, no, it's kind of on us too. Because we have a tendency, don't we? We have a tendency to base our happiness on things that are kind of temporary, don't we? In fact, some psychologists, they took this list right here and they estimated on average how long the things on this list actually make us feel happy. And the number they came up with was 3 days. 3 days. And you're like, wow, that's a really short time. But you look at the list and you're like, oh, that's so true, right? If you gave me $100 today, I'd be happy. But what am I gonna want a couple days from now? Yeah, like another $100, please. Same with accomplishment. You do something great at work and you barely even took time to celebrate it before you started thinking of what do I gotta do next? What do I gotta do next? Appearance is the same way. Someone tells you, you look beautiful. And you're like, oh, warm and fuzzy on the inside for a while. And then you need to hear it again, right? House and car, the average number of days is probably a little higher, but let's just keep it real. Husbands in the room, we all know which one you've zeroed in on in the last 30 seconds. You're sitting there nudging your spouse going, honey, 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 honey. 3 days. Every 3 days, honey. This is from the Lord. Let's take a picture. 3 days. And certainly consumer food and food items is even a shorter amount of time, but on average, 3 days. And it's like, wow, no, that's part of our problem. We're just people who, we're kind of fascinated with what's fleeting, aren't we? We're fascinated with things that are fleeting. We have a tendency to put our happiness in the hands of things that are fleeting. And I just wanted to ask you this morning, what about you? Where are you currently basing your happiness on something or some things that are kind of fleeting? Or where are you tempted to base your happiness on something that's kind of fleeting? Like, what's that thing for you? Because you got one. And no, you probably would never say it's the only thing that can make you happy. And in fact, you might even in your mind know, well, no, that's not gonna make you happy, but if we watched where you spent your time and what you were chasing after, you sure are tempted to live like it will. What's that thing for you? Because we all have one. We're all doing this in some way, and that's why we have a happiness problem. And I just wonder, have you noticed it? Have you noticed it in your life? Because it doesn't show up with a label, happiness problem. No, it shows up in things like anxiety or insecurity or fear or frustration or anger or jealousy or competition or conflict or overworking or overspending or overeating or over-medicating or over-drinking, because that's what happens when you're constantly chasing happiness. That's what happens when happiness looks like this right here. It's what happens when happiness is always some future event, always some hopeful date on the calendar. And the thing is, none of us are immune. None of us in this room, including me, are immune, because think about it. Look, we all get that when somebody doesn't have enough, like they don't have enough of their needs or their wants, that they're unhappy. Like, we understand that and we get that, but just let me ask you this. Raise your hand in the air if you know someone with plenty who's still unhappy. Oh, yeah. Anybody want to own that? Yeah, you know someone who's got more than you and probably more than they ever dreamed, but they still got an answer to the question, if I only had blank, I'd be happy. Man, it's like that now kind of famous Tom Brady interview. Have y'all seen that? Where he goes, hey, why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still feel like there's gotta be something greater out there for me? People would probably say that, man, you have it all, but me, I'm just thinking, gosh, there's gotta be more than this. What? You got Super Bowl rings, you got a supermodel wife, and you got a super big house. There's gotta be more than this? Y'all, that's terrifying. We are a culture who is chasing, not finding happiness. And we're spending the best years of our life doing it. That's my question this morning. Like I said, what about you? What about me? Do you want to spend the best years of your life doing that? Feeling this? Because it seems like most people are poised to in our culture. And that is why I think that what Paul writes in his letter to the Philippians is so relevant for us today. Whether you are a Christian or not a Christian, whether you're young or old, whether you have extra or you have barely enough. Because here's what he says right here. He says, I have learned the secret of being content. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. ... And if that doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will. And that's the life hack that we're talking about today. It's about how to learn contentment in a culture that chases happiness. How to learn contentment in a culture that chases happiness. And what he says next is the secret. It's the life hack. And I really do believe that this life hack, it could change our lives. But before I get there though, I do want to acknowledge something. I know just now, some of you were a little thrown off by this word right here. You were like, contentment? Wait. I thought we were talking about happiness. I like happiness. Contentment, I kind of feel like you were just promising me a really hot blind date. And then when you described them, you were like, they have a great personality. And now I'm like, I'm not as excited as I was before, you know? Like, no, hey, I like the word happiness. I'm not sure I like the word contentment because contentment kind of sounds a little bit like settling, doesn't it? You're like, well, contentment, that's less than happiness. And furthermore, contentment, that's kind of like less than pursuing all of my hopes and dreams and my ambitions and stuff like that. And I just want to say, no, it's not. Do you know what the definition of contentment is? This is the definition of contentment. Contentment is a state of peaceful happiness. Importantly, the definition is not the pursuit of peaceful happiness. The definition is the state of already having happiness. So when Paul says content or contentment, he is talking about happiness. He's just talking about a different form of it than you and I are usually talking about it. Because when we say happiness, what we usually actually mean is chasing happiness. He's talking about finding it. The other problem with contentment though is it does sound a little bit like anti-dreaming or anti-future, anti-ambition. And in fact, I asked our pastor, Andy Stanley, I said, Andy, I'm talking to some of the brightest, sharpest, most successful, cultured people in like probably the state of Georgia. How do I get them to buy into the word contentment? And he goes, well, tell them. So by the way, you can't say you haven't heard from Andy Stanley this morning. He said to ask you actually, ask them if anyone's gonna be reading their personal correspondence 2,000 years from now. Because the man who wrote this phrase in this verse, he's launched a movement that took over his known world, that impacted our world, and we're still reading his letters. So this man is not about to ask you to abandon your ambition or ditch your dreams or give up on your goals, because that's not what contentment is. Contentment is simply this. That's the way I wrote it down. Contentment is finding happiness where we are, not just where we want to be. Contentment is finding happiness where we are, not just where we want to be one day. And when you hear that definition, you realize, oh, that's what we're missing. That's the thing that we're missing. That's the thing that 33% or less of us actually seem to have. It's contentment. We don't need to learn the secret of chasing happiness. We got that down fine. We need the secret of learning contentment. And Paul's saying, it's possible. It's possible. It is possible to learn contentment in a culture that chases happiness. And what comes next is the secret. It's the life hack. And man, I'm telling you, this life hack, it's a game changer. It's one that has not just helped me, it's one that is helping me. And what I love about it is one that you can literally walk out of here and start applying to your life right now, and I promise you it's gonna make a difference. I will warn you though, it's one you're gonna need to carry with you for the rest of your life, because I really, really actually believe that what we're about to talk about, it might actually be able to guarantee that you end up finding, not just chasing, happiness with all of your days. And you might be surprised when you hear it in just a second, because chances are a lot of you have heard this before. But chances are you also have always heard it out of context, because that's where most of us always hear it. And so that means chances are you never got the huge principle that he was trying to communicate in it. And so here it is. He said, I've learned the secret of being content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And you might be going like, wait a minute, it's this verse? Yeah, it's that verse. Like if you've lived in the South or been friends with a Christian on Instagram, you've seen this verse probably, right? I can do all things through Christ. And you might be having the same reaction that I had, right? Like, wait. I thought this verse was about scoring touchdowns and launching a business and meeting my sales goals and getting my dream job and dating my dream girl or guy and potty training my kids and surviving my in-laws. You know, like I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, you know? But it's not. The all things that he's talking about is referring to the verse that comes before. I have learned the secret of being content, whether in plenty or in want. I can do all things. I can face all things. I can find, not just chase happiness, in all things because Christ gives me strength. That's the secret. Now, I understand that you may be tempted to receive that as a little bit cute, right? Kind of sounds a little bit like one of those church answers, you know, if y'all who grew up in church, remember you show up at church and they ask what your name is and you're like, well, my name's Jamie, but I'm pretty sure the answer is Jesus, because that's the answer to every question in church, right? Jesus, you know? Or maybe it sounds a little bit like a Christian magic trick, you know? Like you're having a bad day, just go, Jesus. And it's like, whoo, I feel better, you know? Ooh, Mufasa, say it again. Jesus. And you're like, I don't really have time for church answers and cheap tricks. I just want to make sure you understand he is not offering you a church answer or some Christian magic trick. He is pointing us to a principle that is the secret of contentment. And that principle is this right here. Elevate what's ultimate. Elevate what's ultimate. Because that's what he just did in that verse. Don't miss this. We're getting a glimpse into his mind and we just saw him do something mentally that you've probably done, maybe without even thinking about it. Like for an example, it's like the time when your kids were on your last nerve and you were frustrated and you were impatient and you're about to pull your hair out or their hair out and you're like, can I just chain them in the backyard? Can I sell them? Whatever's going on. And then you flipped on the news and you saw something like what's been happening recently. And your frustration evaporated. And when you turned off the TV, you didn't go back to just being mad at them. You put your arms around them and you just thanked God that they were yours. Or it's like the time you were at work and you were just thinking about how mad you were at your boss or the company or how things were going or this or that. And then you went to lunch with one of your friends who was unemployed or who was still looking for a job, and you heard about how uncertain their future felt and how at risk their family felt. And magically you walked back into work with more gratitude than you've ever had in like 6 months. Or it's like the time that you simply just didn't like your Instagram account, right? Because it wasn't as cool as somebody else's, or you didn't like your car because it wasn't as cool as someone else's, or you didn't like your clothes because they weren't as cool as someone else's, and then you showed up here on Sunday morning and you volunteered in Upstreet or in Wambaland, or maybe you went down to the Atlanta Mission and you served the homeless of our city, or you went across the ocean on a mission trip and somehow you just stopped caring. Why? Because for a second, you remembered what really mattered. You took your eyes off all the stuff that's fleeting and you were forced to elevate what's ultimate. And in that moment, you stopped chasing happiness and you felt contentment. That's what Paul did in that verse. That's what he's doing. He's elevating what's ultimate because for him, there was nothing more ultimate than Jesus. He's going, in my times of plenty, in my times of want, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And he's saying, if you're gonna learn, and if I'm gonna learn the secret of contentment, then we're gonna have to do the same thing. We're gonna have to elevate what's ultimate, because when you elevate what's ultimate, you are freed from what's fleeting. When you elevate what's ultimate, you are freed from what's fleeting. That's how you go from chasing to finding happiness. That's how you learn contentment. And just imagine for a second, how happy would you be if you lived life like this? More than that, how productive would you be? How much more significant might your life be if that's how you live, if you focused your life on what's ultimate and you were freed from what's fleeting? When you elevate what's ultimate, you're freed from what's fleeting, and that's what he's saying. And now, look, I realize this is one of those things that sounds real easy to say, right? That's a valid objection. Like, oh, elevate what's ultimate, woohoo. It's easy for you to say, Paul. And I just want you to know, it's actually not easy for him to say, because this isn't just something that he said, it's actually something that he did. And he tells us that, in fact, in the verse right before this, he says, I know what it is to be in need. I've had those times in my life. And I know what it is to have plenty. I've had those times in my life. And you can actually read about them in the same letter. In fact, does anybody know where he was when he wrote this letter? Yeah, he was in prison. The man's in prison with chains on his arms, on trial for his life for being a Christian. And y'all, like, I get mad when that parking deck takes forever for me to get out of church. He's in prison. And yet, weirdly, this letter, it doesn't read like someone who's in prison. It doesn't read like someone who's discouraged and depressed and afraid and, hopeless. In fact, to the contrary, he says words like, I'm feeling encouraged. I'm feeling courageous. I'm feeling fearless. In fact, I'm rejoicing right now. How? Well, he tells us. From prison. He says this, for to me, to live is Christ, to die is gain. In other words, guys, I basically got two options going on. If I live, I'm gonna serve Jesus. If I die, I'm meeting Jesus. So what do I have to lose? Now listen, think about it. What did he just do from prison? He elevated what was ultimate. Have you ever met somebody like that? Like a person or a group of people, maybe it was in their city or in your travels or on a mission trip. Have you ever met a person or a group of people who had far less than you had, who had far worse circumstances than you, and yet somehow they seem to have twice the joy? Do you know how they did that? Not by changing their bad circumstances, though we want that to happen. They did that by finding something that was bigger than their bad circumstances, something that was more ultimate. And if you and I are gonna keep our times of want from robbing us of our joy and our security and our contentment and our peace, then we're gonna have to learn to do the same. Like when you walk back into the home you can no longer afford, from the job you're probably not gonna be able to keep, and you look at your spouse and you go, this really, really stinks, but you know what? We still have each other, and that's what matters. And you find joy in your home. Or it's like when you're a med student and everyone else is hanging out and dating, but you have no time because all you do is study, and you put a picture of a surgeon on your phone so that you can remember, I was made for this, and one day I'm gonna save lives, and that's what matters. And then you find joy in your studies that you never had before. That's the same thing that Paul is doing from prison. Except that when you're a Jesus follower, it just gets even bigger, because it's not just family or a calling or making a difference in the world that's our ultimate. I mean, Jesus is our ultimate, right? And that takes it to a whole new level. And maybe some of us who are Christians going through tough circumstances right now need to pull a Paul and walk out of here and proclaim over our time of want, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Because yeah, I may be in some of the toughest circumstances, but I have a Savior who's standing in the middle of them with me. And what I'm facing, it might be bigger than me, but it is not bigger than him. And even on my darkest day, in my greatest trial, in my time of greatest loss, I could lose everything that I have, but you know what? I'll still have everything that I need because I still have him. That's contentment. That's contentment. And I just wonder, do you need to join Paul this morning in elevating what's ultimate in your time of want? You see, what's cool is Paul didn't just know times of want, he also knew times of plenty. Before Paul was in prison, Paul was in the penthouse, so to speak. He was the man, and you can read about it in this letter. I mean, he had the pedigree, he had the position, he had the power, he had the money, he had the access, he had the connections. He was 40 under 40, he drove a Dodge Stratus, he was destined for the C-suite, and man, he was going places, and you can read about it. And when you do, honestly, the question that pops up into my mind is, how did that guy become this guy? Like, how did he stay grounded? How did he stay focused in his life? How did he learn contentment from here? Well, he tells us. Straight from the top of the ladder, he says these words. He says, but whatever was to my profit, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. In other words, he's like, guys, I had it all. But then I found something better. Now think about it. What did he just do? In the middle of his time of plenty, what did he do? He elevated what was ultimate. He put something front and center that was more important than money, more important than status, more important than access, and he went all in to it. And I wonder, have you ever met someone like that? I bet you have. Have you ever met someone who was really successful, but they somehow seemed immune to their own success? like they weren't caught up in it. They weren't addicted to the chase, but it was very obvious that they were grounded in something deeper, something that mattered. You wanna know how they did that? Not by getting more. They did it by finding something better, something more ultimate to live for. And if you and I are gonna keep our times of plenty from intoxicating us and from getting us off track, we're gonna have to learn to do the same. Like when you put a picture of your family on your work desk to remind yourself that you are not there for the money, that you and the money instead are there for them. Or like when you tell your work team to celebrate people's stories, not just balance sheets, because the people you serve and the good you do is what really matters around here. Or it's like when you have a personal giving plan that you make and not just a personal getting plan, because in the end of the day, you want your life to matter. It's the same thing that Paul is doing in his time of plenty, except for the fact that when you're a Jesus follower, it just gets even bigger, right? Because we're not just grounded in family, or not just grounded in making a difference, or just grounded in their causes. We're grounded in Jesus. And that takes it to a whole different level. And then maybe some of us who are Christians, who have great circumstances, who are in times of plenty, and yet we're not content, and yet we're not really prioritizing right, maybe we need to pull a Paul. And we need to walk out of here and declare over our plenty, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Because I got a lot, and it's good. In fact, it's great, it's awesome. But you know what? He's better. He's like way better. It's not even a comparison. And so I still have places that I'm hoping to go in life, but when it comes to the things that matter, man, I've already arrived. Like I am here because I have him. And that means that I am loved. It means that I am full. It means that I am blessed. It means that I am rich. It means that I am alive. It means that I have all that I need. So if I get more, awesome. But I don't need it. I don't need it. My peace doesn't depend on it. My joy doesn't depend on it. My identity and security doesn't depend on it. My future doesn't depend on it. I already have my greatest treasure, and he is all that I need. So as for me and my house, we're not gonna chase after what's fleeting. We're gonna invest in what's forever. And so everything we have is just more to leverage in a life of knowing and serving Jesus in this city. That's contentment. And I wondered, do you need to join Paul this morning in elevating what's ultimate in your time of plenty? Because when you elevate what's ultimate, you're freed from what's fleeting. And I'm telling you, guys, just ask someone who's older, they'll tell you this is true. If you chase happiness in life, you're never gonna catch it. We're never gonna catch it, and we're never gonna be content. But if you learn contentment, ironically, you'll be happy. And your life will be more productive and more significant than ever before because it's focused on what matters. When you elevate what's ultimate, you're freed from what's fleeting. And so that's my question for us this morning, question for me this morning, question that my wife and I are gonna ask at home. What's ultimate? What's ultimate for you? Have you ever stopped to answer that question? Or have you stopped recently to remember the answer to that question? Maybe you need to. I would say you owe it to yourself. Shoot, you owe it to your family. You owe it to your employees, your coworkers, to answer that question. And that's my challenge for us today my challenge to you and to me is to go home today and this week sometime and circle up with somebody, your spouse or your friend or whatever. I challenge you to walk back into your biggest happiness gap, wherever that is in your life, where you most feel the quest for more, and just ask the question, what's ultimate? And when you find it, elevate it. And if you need help trying to figure that out, here's a great question to start with. What are you most grateful for? What are you most grateful for? That's a great question because it's impossible to answer that with something that's not important, right? That question forces you to get past things that are means to an end, like money and power and fame, and it forces you to start getting to ends in life, the things that matter. That's a great question, and it will point you in the direction of what's ultimate in your life. So what is it? What is ultimate for you? Is it your family? Is it your legacy? Is it the help you give to others, the blessing you give to others, the prosperity you're able to create, the structures you're able to build? Is it your character? What is it? Identify what's ultimate and elevate it. And here's what that might look like for starters. It might look like beginning your day there. Maybe you need to wake up every morning, look at your kids and go, there why I'm going to work. That's what's ultimate. It would look like building your life there. Like bending your life around what is ultimate. Like spending the best of your brilliance and your creativity and your time on what's ultimate. Like stop spending days of your life and giving away days of your life on things that don't matter. Bend your job description there if you have to. Find a new one if you need to, but build your life around what's ultimate. And measure your success there. Like from now on, when someone asks you, how's your month going or how's life, or you do that self-eval in your head, this becomes your new metric for who you are and how you're doing, not something else that doesn't matter. And go back to it time and time and time again and plant it deep. What's ultimate? Because if you do, you will be on the doorstep of discovering contentment. And it will change the course of your life, and I believe it'll change the quality of your life, and that's why I'm praying that you'll go and ask that question and answer it this week. I hope you will. At the same time, I also want to suggest what I think Paul discovered and tried to suggest to us, and that's simply this, that there are a lot of things that are ultimate and a lot of things that are important to us and to God, but there is only one ultimate, and that's Jesus. I think that's what you're gonna discover the more that you do this and the more that you ask this question. There's really only one ultimate, and it's Jesus, because he is the only thing that is bigger than your greatest tragedy and better than your greatest treasure. He is the only one who can carry you through the lowest of the lows and the highest of the highs, and he's the only one who in the end of the day will satisfy your soul. He is the ultimate. And so at the same time that I'm hoping you're gonna go back into wherever your gap of happiness is and find what's ultimate and elevate it, I'm also praying that a lot of you are gonna walk out of here today and decide to elevate Jesus in your life. Like I'm praying that you'll begin your day with him, that some of you will literally wake up and go, you know what, today I may be facing infertility or a job loss or a diagnosis or some tough season, but I have a Savior who's facing it with me. I'm praying you're gonna build your life around it, that you would bend your life around Jesus, that maybe some of you for the first time would begin to connect the dots between what you do at work and what God's doing in the world, and you would discover maybe a brand new kind of job description, one where the stakes are higher than they have ever been, where stuff matters more than it ever has, and you build your life around him. I'm praying that you measure your success by him. That from now on, you would just say, you know what, my dashboard isn't Instagram, and it's not my bank account, and it's definitely not my front lawn. It's Jesus and his opinion of me and his plan for me. And I'm praying you go back to it time and time again and plant it so deep in your life, because if you do, you will discover the secret of contentment. And it will drastically change the course of your life, and it will drastically change the quality of your life. And I just want to close with this. The person who taught this to me the most, who modeled this most for me in my life, was my grandmother. And her name was Lois Pritchard, and she lived in rural North Carolina. And she and my granddaddy, for most of their lives, they didn't have much at all. So they knew a lot of times of want. And even when we were little, I remember my grandmother would say this phrase a lot. She would say, the Lord's given us all that we need. And she'd say it often, Lord's given us all that we need. You can hear your grandmother saying it. And she'd say it, she would say it a lot. But as my mom and my dad had success at AT&T and my dad later at Bell South, and times of plenty came, it didn't faze her. I mean, it didn't matter where we were, what nice restaurant we were eating at, what really cool vacation we were on. She would often say something like, don't forget, he's the greatest thing that we have. Sometimes she'd wag her finger. Don't you forget, he's the greatest thing that we have. She was just a woman she had identified what was ultimate, and she just constantly elevated it, constantly. And at the end of her life, she developed dementia, or maybe it was just old age, but she got to the point where she wasn't communicative, basically more or less non-responsive, wasn't really all there. Sometimes I didn't know if she even recognized me or not. but couldn't speak. She was 98 years old when my mom went and visited her, and what turned out to be 3 days before she died. And my mom recorded it because she just wanted to have the time to remember it's one of those last times with her mom. And obviously no conversation's happening. She doesn't speak. But then my mom started singing some of the old hymns that my grandmother sung growing up. And then she started reading from the Bible. And she read the 23rd Psalm, or started reading. And my grandmother, who hadn't uttered a word for who knows how many months or years, who you weren't really even sure was there, but she was, you thought. But she responded with this.
But the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness. And for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death will fear no evil, for thou art with me.
Yeah. She would go on to finish the rest of it. I just want to ask you, hey, what's carrying you through your times of plenty and your times of want? Man, I hope it's Jesus, because he's the only thing that's bigger than your greatest tragedy and bigger than your greatest treasure. And I am so grateful that my grandmother not only discovered what's ultimate, but she planted it so deeply in her soul and so deeply in her mind that in her last days, when she couldn't even speak, when it seemed like so much of her mind was gone, with the last couple of synapses that she had in her brain, she was holding on to, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And even if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for he is with me. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. She discovered the secret of contentment. And you can too. I'm telling you, if we chase happiness, we're never gonna catch it. And we're never gonna be content. But if we learn contentment, you're gonna be happy. And your life is gonna be more productive and more meaningful than it ever has before. So would you please pray for me what I'm praying for you, and that is this: may we learn contentment in a culture that chases happiness by elevating what's ultimate. Because when you elevate what's ultimate, you are freed from what's fleeting. I can, you can, we can do all things through Christ who gives us strength.